The fluorescent lights of Chicago Memorial's ICU hummed with their usual monotonous drone, a sound that had become the soundtrack to Sofia Ramos's life over the past 3 years. She moved through the sterile corridors with practiced efficiency, her worn sneakers the only pair she owned that didn't hurt after 12-hour shifts, squeaking softly against the polished linoleum. The name badge clipped to her scrubs read, Sofia Ramos, RN, but it didn't mention the weight she carried. Supporting her 72-year-old grandmother in their cramped studio apartment, sending money to her mother and 2 younger siblings back in Manila, and the crushing student loan debt that made every paycheck disappear before it arrived. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. It was nearly 3 a.m, that dead hour when the hospital held its breath, between the chaos of emergency admissions and the gradual awakening of day shift. Sofia had just finished updating charts for her assigned patients when charge nurse Patricia approached with an expression that meant trouble, or at least complication. "Sofia, I need you to take over room 312, Patricia said, her voice carrying the exhaustion of 20 years in critical care. "It's the VIP case. Elena Moretti." Sofia's hands stilled over the keyboard. Everyone at Chicago Memorial knew about Elena Moretti, even the nurses who didn't work the ICU. The wife of Dante Moretti, a name whispered with equal parts fear and respect throughout the city. She'd been in a coma for 6 months, her room constantly guarded by men in expensive suits, whose eyes tracked every movement in the hallway. "What happened to Rachel?" Sofia asked, referring to the senior nurse who had been assigned to Mrs. Moretti since her admission. Patricia's expression tightened. "She requested a transfer," said the security. Presence was too intense. The family specifically. "Mr. Moretti is very particular about his wife's care." That was the careful way hospital staff referred to Dante Moretti's reputation for destroying anyone who failed to meet his exacting standards. 2 nurses had already been dismissed at his request, and 1 doctor had mysteriously transferred to a hospital in another state after a disagreement about Elena's treatment protocol. "I understand if you'd prefer not to," Patricia began. "I'll take her," Sofia interrupted. She needed this job desperately, and refusing a direct assignment wasn't an option. Besides, a patient was a patient, regardless of who their family was. Room 312 sat at the end of the ICU, separated from other patients by both distance and the 2 men who flanked its entrance. They straightened as Sofia approached, their eyes conducting a swift, professional assessment that made her skin prickle with awareness. These weren't hospital security. These were Dante. Moretti's personal guards, and the bulges beneath their tailored jackets suggested they were very well armed. "I'm the new nurse assigned to Mrs. Moretti," Sofia explained, keeping her voice steady and professional despite the anxiety tightening her chest. She held up her badge for inspection. The taller guard, a man with steel-gray hair and a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, studied her badge with intense scrutiny before nodding. "Marco Giuliani, head of Mrs. Moretti's security detail. You'll be searched before entering and exiting the room. No phones, no cameras, no unauthorized personnel. Understood?" Sofia nodded, submitting to a thorough but professional pat-down conducted by a female security officer who emerged from a nearby alcove. They confiscated her phone, placing it in a locked box, before finally allowing her to enter the room. The first thing that struck Sofia about Elena Moretti was how young she looked. Despite 6 months in a coma, despite the ventilator tube and IV eyelines, despite the pale translucence of her skin, she was beautiful. Dark hair fanned across the pillow, delicate features that held an echo of Southeast Asian heritage mixed with something Mediterranean. Her chart listed her age as 38, but she could have passed for 30. Sofia approached the bed slowly, taking in the state-of-the-art monitoring equipment that surrounded Elena like a technological cocoon. This wasn't standard hospital issue. This was private medical equipment, the kind that cost more than Sofia made in a year, installed at Dante Moretti's insistence to ensure his wife received the absolute best care available. "Hello, Mrs. Moretti," Sofia said softly, following her habit of speaking to comatose patients as if they could hear her. Research suggested they sometimes could, even when they couldn't respond. "My name is Sofia. I'll be taking care of you tonight." She began her assessment with gentle efficiency, checking vitals, adjusting IV lines, noting the readings from the various monitors. Elena's condition was stable but unchanged, the same word that had appeared in her chart day after day for 6 months. Stable. Neither improving nor deteriorating, existing in that liminal space between life and death. As Sofia worked, She noticed details that spoke of constant, devoted care. Someone had recently washed Elena's hair. It smelled faintly of jasmine. Her nails were neatly trimmed and filed. A small vase of fresh orchids sat on the windowsill, replaced weekly according to the notes. Despite the clinical setting, someone was fighting to maintain Elena's dignity, to remind the world that she was a person, not just a body in a bed. The medical chart told a story of mystery and suspected violence. Elena Moretti had been admitted 6 months ago with symptoms consistent with poisoning specifically, a rare neurotoxin that had induced a coma before doctors could identify and counteract it. The police report, heavily redacted, suggested foul play. The working theory, whispered among staff, was that someone had attempted to poison Dante Moretti, and his wife had consumed the intended fatal dose by mistake. Sofia was adjusting Elena's positioning to prevent bed sores when she noticed a photograph tucked into the corner of the bedside table. A family portrait. Elena, radiant and laughing, standing next to a man who could only be Dante Moretti. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair touched with gray at the temples and eyes that even in a photograph carried an intensity that made Sofia's breath catch. Between them stood 2 children, a boy of about 7 and a girl, perhaps 5, both with their mother's warm coloring and their father's strong features. The door opened without warning, and Sofia turned to find herself facing the man from the photograph. Dante Moretti in person was even more formidable than his image suggested. He moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to command, dressed in an immaculate charcoal suit despite the early hour, his presence immediately dominating the room in a way that had nothing to do with his physical size and everything to do with the force of his personality. His eyes, dark, almost black in the dim lighting, swept over Sofia with an assessment that felt both impersonal and uncomfortably thorough. Then his gaze shifted to his wife, and something in his expression cracked, revealing a grief so profound it was almost painful to witness. "Mr. Moretti," Sofia said quietly, instinctively stepping back to give him space. "I'm Sofia Ramos, your wife's new nurse. Where's Rachel?" His voice was deep, controlled, but edged with suspicion that came from 6 months of vigilance and disappointment. "She requested a transfer. I've been assigned to care for your wife." Sofia met his gaze directly. Something she'd learned in nursing school: patients' families needed to see confidence, competence, not fear. "I've reviewed her complete medical history and current care plan. I promise you, Mr. Moretti, your wife will receive excellent care." Dante studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he moved to Elena's bedside, his hand finding his wife's with a tenderness that contrasted sharply with the dangerous reputation that preceded him. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles with such profound devotion that Sofia felt like an intruder witnessing something too intimate for outside eyes. "Elena, amor mio," he murmured, his voice roughened by emotion. "I'm here. I'm always here." He spoke to her in Italian for several minutes, words Sofia couldn't understand but whose meaning was clear in his tone. Love, desperation, promises. When he finally looked up, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "Tell me honestly," he said to Sofia, his voice carefully neutral now. "What do you think? Can she hear us?" Sofia chose her words carefully. "Medical research suggests that some comatose patients retain varying degrees of awareness. We can't know for certain what your wife perceives, but many doctors recommend speaking to coma patients as if they're fully conscious. It can't hurt, and it might help. The specialists say there's been no change in her condition for 3 months, Dante continued, his jaw tightening. No improvement, no deterioration. Just nothing. They're starting to use words like persistent vegetative state. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one, and quality of life discussions. The last phrase emerged with barely controlled fury, and Sofia understood immediately that anyone suggesting they discontinue Elena's care would face consequences far worse than professional disagreement. "Your wife's brain activity shows continued function," Sofia said, consulting the chart. "She's not brain dead, Mr. Moretti. Where there's brain activity, there's potential for recovery, even if the timeline is uncertain." Something flickered in Dante's expression. Hope, perhaps, or maybe just gratitude that someone wasn't giving up on his wife. He nodded slowly, then checked his watch, a gesture that seemed unconscious, automatic. "I need to attend to some business," he said, the vulnerability disappearing behind his controlled exterior. "But I'll return at dawn. I come every morning at 6, before my children wake. They don't. They don't need to see their mother like this more often than necessary. The admission revealed more than he perhaps intended, that he was shielding his children from the worst of this tragedy, taking the burden of constant vigil upon himself. Sofia felt an unexpected pang of sympathy for this dangerous man who was, at his core, simply a husband and father facing an unbearable situation. After Dante left, Sofia continued her care routine, speaking softly to Elena as she worked. Your husband loves you very much, Mrs. Moretti, and your children, they're beautiful. You have so much to fight for, so much waiting for you when you wake up. As she adjusted Elena's blankets, Sofia noticed something in the medical notes she'd missed earlier. A detail in the admissions paperwork, half obscured by subsequent entries. Elena Santos Moretti. Country of origin, Philippines. Primary language, Tagalog. Secondary languages, English, Italian. Sofia's heart stuttered. Elena was Filipina, a daughter of Sofia's homeland, now trapped in silence in a foreign city, surrounded by people speaking languages that might not reach whatever awareness remained within her damaged brain. Without fully thinking through the decision, Sofia leaned closer to Elena's ear and whispered in Tagalog, the language of her childhood, of her grandmother's stories, and her mother's lullabies. Naririnig mo ba ako? Can you hear me? The monitors continued their steady beeping. Elena's chest rose and fell with mechanical regularity. Nothing changed. Nothing except Sofia's trained eye caught it immediately. Elena's heart rate had increased. Just slightly, just for a moment, but it was there on the monitor. A response. A change. The first change in 3 months. Sofia's hands trembled as she noted the time and the observation in Elena's chart. It could be coincidence. It could be a random fluctuation. But something deep in Sofia's gut, the instinct that had made her a good nurse, told her it was more. She leaned close again, keeping her voice soft, intimate, switching fully to Tagalog now. Ako si Sofia. Taga Manila ako. I'm Sofia. I'm from Manila. Nandito ako para alagaan ka. I'm here to take care of you. Another flutter on the heart monitor. Subtle, but unmistakable. Ligtas ka rito, Sofia continued, her own heart racing now. You're safe here. Ang iyong pamilya ay naghihintay para sa iyo. Your family is waiting for you. Ang iyong mga anak ay kailangan ka. Your children need you. This time the response was stronger. Elena's heart rate elevated from 68 to 74 beats per minute. Her blood pressure ticked up slightly, and Sofia held her breath, barely daring to believe what she was seeing. Elena's right index finger twitched. Just once, just barely. But it moved. Sofia stepped back, her mind racing. She needed to document this. She needed to tell the doctor. She needed to inform Mr. Moretti. But she also needed to be certain, to test this discovery, to understand what was happening before raising hopes that might be crushed by medical reality. She spent the next hour speaking to Elena exclusively in Tagalog, describing Manila's streets, the smell of sampaguita flowers, the taste of halo-halo on a hot summer day. With each familiar reference, each word in their shared mother tongue, Elena's vitals showed subtle but measurable responses. Small changes that had been absent for months were suddenly present, triggered by something as simple as being spoken to in the language of her childhood. When Dr. Chen made his early morning rounds, Sofia showed him her detailed notes, the timestamps, the correlation between her Tagalog words and Elena's physiological responses. This is remarkable, Dr. Chen said, studying the data with growing excitement. We've been communicating with her primarily in English and Italian, languages she learned later in life. But Tagalog is her first language, the language that formed her earliest neural pathways. If there's residual consciousness, that's where it would be most accessible. Should I inform Mr. Moretti? Sofia asked, already knowing the answer but needing the doctor's authority to support her. Dr. Chen checked his watch. He should be here any minute. Let's wait for him and present this together. Sofia, if you're right about this, if language is the key to reaching Mrs. Moretti, you may have just given this family their first real hope in 6 months. Dante Moretti arrived precisely at 6 a.m., as promised. He was accompanied by an older man with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing Marco. His head of security, Sofia realized. Both men radiated the kind of controlled power that came from years of commanding respect through more than just words. Mr. Moretti, Doctor, Chen began. Nurse Ramos has made a significant observation regarding your wife's condition. she responded to Tagalog. Sofia interrupted, unable to contain herself. She pulled up the monitors, showing him the timeline of responses. Your wife's first language is Tagalog, like mine. When I spoke to her in our native language, she showed measurable responses, small but consistent. Her heart rate increased, her blood pressure changed, and Sofia paused, making sure she had his complete attention. Her right index finger moved. The room fell silent. Dante stared at the monitors, then at Sofia, then at his wife's still form in the bed. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, roughened by emotion he couldn't quite control. Show me. Sofia moved to Elena's bedside, acutely aware of Dante's intense focus on every movement, every word. She leaned close to Elena's ear and spoke softly in Tagalog. Elena, kung naririnig mo ako, subukang gumalaw muli. Elena, if you can hear me, try to move again. They waited. The seconds stretched into minutes. Nothing. Sofia felt panic rising. What if it had been coincidence? What if she'd given them false hope? What if Elena's finger twitched? Dante's sharp intake of breath was audible. Again, he commanded. Do it again. Sofia continued speaking in Tagalog, explaining that Elena's husband was here, that he loved her, that their children missed her. With each sentence, Elena's responses became slightly more pronounced. A small movement of her fingers, a barely perceptible flutter of her eyelids, changes so subtle they might have been missed if not for the electronic monitors confirming them. This is the most neurological activity we've seen since her admission, Doctor. Chen confirmed, studying the data with barely contained excitement. Mr. Moretti, I recommend we implement and condition intensive protocol of Tagalog communication. Nurse Ramos should be assigned exclusively to your wife, providing constant verbal stimulation in her native language. Dante's eyes fixed on Sofia with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously exposed and somehow claimed. Whatever you need, he said, his voice carrying the absolute certainty of a man accustomed to bending reality to his will. Resources, staff, equipment, whatever it takes. Nurse Ramos, I'm doubling your salary, effective immediately. You belong to my wife's care team now, exclusively. Mr. Moretti, I'm not sure the hospital, Sofia began. I own 40% of this hospital, Dante interrupted, stating it as simple fact rather than boast. The board will approve whatever I request. You'll work the hours that best serve my wife's recovery, not the hospital's scheduling needs. Is that understood? It wasn't really a question. It was an order from a man who had spent his entire life getting exactly what he wanted through a combination of money, power, and, when necessary, intimidation. Sofia should have been frightened, should have recognized the danger in becoming indispensable to a man like Dante Moretti, should have understood that this was the moment to decline politely and maintain her safe distance from his world. Instead, she looked at Elena's face, at the subtle signs of awareness that had been absent for so long, and thought of what it would mean to give this family their wife and mother back. Understood, she said. I'll need complete access to Mrs. Moretti, freedom to design the communication protocol, and support from the hospital's neurology and speech therapy departments. Dante's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. You'll have everything you need. Marco will ensure you're never interfered with. Doctor. Chen will coordinate with the other departments. He stepped closer to Sofia, his presence overwhelming in the intimate space of the hospital room. Bring my wife back to me, Miss Ramos, and I will be in your debt. That's a debt I paid generously. The promise carried weight beyond mere financial compensation, though Sofia couldn't yet fully understand its implications. She only knew that she'd just crossed a threshold, stepping from the safe anonymity of her previous existence into the dangerous orbit of Dante Moretti's world. A world where she would discover that saving someone's life could be far more complicated than she ever imagined. The transformation of Room 312 began within hours of Dante Moretti's declaration. By noon, hospital administrators Sofia had never met were personally ensuring her needs were met. By evening, a team of specialists, neurologists, speech therapists, language experts had assembled to consult on Elena's case. And by the following morning, Sofia found herself navigating a reality that bore little resemblance to her previous life at Chicago Memorial. Her first indication that everything had changed came when she arrived for her newly restructured shift, no longer the overnight grind, but dedicated 8-hour blocks designed around Elena's optimal responsiveness periods. The usual guard stationed outside room 312 had been joined by 2 additional security personnel, and a private waiting area had been converted into what Marco called the command center. Miss Ramos. Marco greeted her with professional courtesy that somehow still managed to feel like surveillance. Mr. Moretti has arranged for your personal security. This is Angela Romano. She'll accompany you during your commute and any hospital breaks. Sofia turned to find a woman in her 30s, athletic build, with intelligent eyes and a stance that suggested military or law enforcement training. Angela offered a brief smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Personal security? Sofia repeated, the implications sinking in slowly. Why would I need... Mr. Moretti's enemies are numerous, Marco interrupted, his tone suggesting this should be obvious. Your connection to his wife's care makes you valuable. Therefore, you're vulnerable. Angela will ensure no one uses you to get to the family. The casual mention of being used sent a chill down Sofia's spine. This was her first real glimpse into the world surrounding Dante Moretti, a world where nurses could become targets, where helping someone heal could paint a mark on your back. I'm just doing my job, Sofia protested weakly. Marco's expression remained impassive. You're now doing it under Mr. Moretti's protection. That's non-negotiable. Inside room 312, Sofia found that the basic hospital equipment had been supplemented with what Dr. Chen excitedly described as cutting-edge neurological monitoring technology. New machines tracked Elena's brainwave patterns in real time, measuring responses to different stimuli with precision previously unavailable. This equipment usually only exists in research facilities, Dr. Chen explained, adjusting one of the sensors attached to Elena's scalp. Mr. Moretti had it flown in from Johns Hopkins overnight. With this, we can map exactly which areas of Elena's brain respond to your Tagalog communication. Sofia spent the morning designing what she called her language immersion protocol. She would speak to Elena exclusively in Tagalog, starting with simple words and phrases, gradually building to more complex conversations. She brought in recordings of Filipino music, traditional Kundiman love songs, and modern OPM that might trigger emotional memories. She even requested specific foods from Filipino restaurants, though Elena couldn't consume them. The aromas might reach whatever consciousness remained trapped in her silent prison. The responses, when they came, were subtle but unmistakable. When Sofia played Anak by Freddie Aguilar, a classic Filipino song about a parent's love, Elena's heart rate elevated, and her EEG showed increased activity in the emotional centers of her brain. When Sofia described the chaos of Quiapo Market in Manila, Elena's fingers twitched as if trying to reach toward the memory. Most remarkably, when Sofia spoke about children using Tagalog words like anak, child, and pamilya, Elena's responses intensified dramatically. Her children were the key, Sofia realized. The connection strong enough to pull Elena back from wherever she had retreated. Dante began arriving earlier each day, his morning visits extending into hours as he watched Sofia work. He would sit in the corner of the room, silent but intensely focused, observing every interaction between his wife and the nurse, who was slowly, painstakingly building a bridge back to consciousness. "Tell me what you're saying to her," he requested one morning, frustration evident in his voice. "I want to understand. I want to help." Sofia hesitated. There was something intimate about the language she shared with Elena, a connection that felt private, sacred even. But the desperation in Dante's eyes, this powerful man reduced to helplessness by his wife's condition, moved her. "I'm telling her about her children," Sofia explained softly. "I describe what they might be doing right now. I make up stories about their day, their breakfast, their school, their questions about when Mama will come home. I'm trying to make her remember what she's fighting for." Dante's jaw tightened, emotion flickering across his face before he controlled it. "My daughter Isabella, she turns 6 next week. She asks every night if Mama will wake up for her birthday. My son Marco, named for my capo here." He gestured toward the older man standing guard. "He started having nightmares. He's only 8, and he's already learning that the people you love can be taken from you without warning." The raw pain in his voice cracked something in Sofia's professional armor. This wasn't just the notorious Dante Moretti, rumored crime boss and dangerous man. This was a father, watching his children suffer. A husband fighting to save his wife with the only weapons available to him: money, power, and now, Sofia's unexpected gift. "I have recordings you could play for her," Dante continued, pulling out his phone with slightly trembling hands. "The children's voices. Would that help?" "Yes," Sofia said immediately. Familiar voices, especially her children's, could be incredibly powerful. What Dante showed her next broke her heart in ways she hadn't anticipated. Videos of Isabella and young Marco speaking to their unconscious mother, their small voices wavering between hope and confusion. "Mama, it's Isabella. I got an A on my spelling test. I wanted to tell you first, like always. Mom, Dad says you can hear us even though you can't talk. So I'm going to tell you about my baseball game." Sofia incorporated these recordings into her protocol, playing them while monitoring Elena's responses. The neurological activity was undeniable. Elena's brain lit, looking up at her children's voices like a map of love and longing. 2 weeks into the intensive treatment, Elena's eyes opened. It happened during an afternoon session when Sofia was describing a Filipino celebration, the rhythm and color of a fiesta. One moment Elena's eyes were closed as they had been for 6 months, and the next they were open, unfocused and confused, but unmistakably aware. "Dr. Chen," Sofia called, her voice sharp with urgency even as she maintained her calm bedside manner. "Elena, nandito ako. Ligtas ka. I'm here. You're safe." The medical team descended within minutes, but Sofia never left Elena's side, continuing to speak in Tagalog, providing an anchor of familiarity in the chaos of her awakening. Elena's eyes darted around the room, panic evident in her rapid breathing and elevated heart rate. "Nasaan ako?" Elena whispered, her voice rough from months of disuse, the Tagalog words barely audible. "Where am I?" "You're in the hospital," Sofia answered in Tagalog, gripping Elena's hand. "You've been sick, but you're getting better. Your husband is on his way. Your children are safe." The mention of her children focused Elena's wandering attention. Her lips formed a word. "Anak? Children? They're safe," Sofia repeated. "Ligtas silang lahat. They're all safe." Dante arrived like a storm, Marco barely keeping pace as he burst into the room. His eyes locked on Elena's face, on her open eyes, and something in his expression shattered relief and joy and grief all colliding at once. "Elena," he breathed, moving to her bedside with surprising gentleness for such a large man. "Amore mio, you're awake. You came back to me." But Elena's eyes didn't focus on him. They remained fixed on Sofia, the only familiar element in her confused awakening. When Dante reached for her hand, she flinched away. A small movement, but noticeable. The hurt that flashed across Dante's face was quickly controlled, but Sofia had seen it. She understood. Immediately Elena had awakened to Sofia's voice, Sofia's language, Sofia's presence. The connection that should have been between husband and wife had somehow, inadvertently, been transferred to the stranger who had spent weeks building bridges into Elena's damaged consciousness. "She's disoriented, doctor," Chen explained, reading the monitors. "This is completely normal for coma emergence. She may not immediately recognize people or places. Her memory will return gradually." But Sofia noticed something the doctor had in Elena's eyes held not just confusion, but fear. Specifically, fear when she looked at the men surrounding her bed, even her own husband. "Everyone step back," Sofia said with more authority than a nurse typically used in the presence of doctors, and certainly in the presence of Dante Moretti. "She's overwhelmed. Too many people, too much stimulation." To her surprise, Dante immediately complied, backing away despite the visible effort it cost him. Marco ushered the medical team to a respectful distance, leaving only Sofia close to Elena's bedside. "Elena," Sofia said softly in Tagalog, "you're safe. These people want to help you. The man who was just here, the one who's so worried that's your husband, Dante. Do you remember him?" Elena's eyes showed confusion, then something that might have been recognition, distant and uncertain. "Dante," she repeated, the name foreign on her tongue, as if she was tasting a word from a language she'd forgotten. Over the following hours, as Elena drifted in and out of consciousness, a pattern emerged. She responded to Sofia immediately, relaxing at her voice, following her instructions without hesitation. But with others, even Dante, she remained withdrawn and fearful, her fragmented memories not yet restored enough to distinguish friend from threat. The neuropsychologist Dr. Patel explained it during the team conference that evening, held in the private waiting area while Elena slept. The poisoning caused significant trauma to Elena's brain, particularly areas associated with memory and emotional processing. Right now, her clearest neural pathways are the oldest ones, those formed in childhood, in her native language. Everything else is fog. Her relationship with her husband, her adult life, even her children, those memories are there, but she can't access them yet. "How long?" Dante demanded, his control fracturing after a day of watching his wife fail to recognize him. "How long until she remembers her life, Her family? Dr. Patel exchanged glances with Dr. Chen before answering carefully. It could be days, weeks, or months. Every coma emergence is different. The good news is that the memories aren't gone, they're just temporarily inaccessible. With proper therapy and stimulation, they should return. And in the meantime, Dante's voice was dangerously quiet. In the meantime, Dr. Patel said, she needs stability and familiar touchstones. Miss Ramos has become that touchstone. I recommend she remain Elena's primary caregiver during this crucial recovery period. What followed was a gradual, delicate process of reintroduction. Sofia became the bridge between Elena and the life she couldn't remember. Each day, she would prepare Elena for visits from Dante, explaining in Tagalog who he was, showing her photos, building context before each interaction. Your husband loves you very much, Sofia would explain. He's been here every day while you slept. He's the father of your children. You chose to build a life with him. Slowly, painfully, recognition began to return. A flicker in Elena's eyes when Dante entered the room. A small smile when he brought her favorite flowers, white orchids, which Sofia had mentioned she responded to. A tentative acceptance of his hand in hers. But the real breakthrough came when Dante brought Isabella and young Marco to visit. Sofia had prepared Elena extensively, showing her photos, playing the recordings, building anticipation. When the children entered Marco, trying to be brave, Isabella openly weeping, Elena's entire demeanor transformed. Anak, she whispered, the Tagalog word for children coming instinctively even as she struggled to remember their names. Tears streamed down her face as Sofia helped position the children on either side of her bed, close enough to touch but careful not to overwhelm her. Isabella, Sofia prompted gently in Tagalog, your daughter, and Marco, your son. Isabella, Marco. Elena repeated the names like prayers, her hands trembling as she reached to touch their faces. Mga anak ko. My children. Dante watched from the doorway, his expression carefully controlled, but Sofia could see the tears he was fighting. This was what he'd been fighting for, this moment of recognition, of connection, of his family beginning to knit itself back together. But Sofia also noticed something else. The way Dante's eyes kept returning to her, with an intensity that had nothing to do with medical updates or treatment protocols. There was something else there, gratitude, yes, but also something more complicated. Something that made Sofia deeply uncomfortable even as she couldn't quite look away. After the children left exhausted and overwhelmed but happier than they'd been in months, Dante requested a private moment with Sofia. Marco positioned himself discreetly outside the door as Dante led Sofia to the small conference room adjacent to Elena's ward. I need you to understand what you've given my family, he began without preamble, his dark eyes fixed on her with that unsettling intensity. 6 months ago, someone poisoned the wine at my dinner table. It was meant for me, an assassination attempt from rivals who thought I was vulnerable. Elena drank it instead, saving my life and nearly losing hers. Sofia had suspected something like this, but hearing it confirmed sent ice through her veins. Who did it? That's being handled, Dante said, his tone making clear that handled meant something permanent and violent. What matters now is that Elena is awakening because of you. My children have their mother back because of you. I don't forget debts, Miss Ramos. Especially debts that can never truly be repaid. I'm just doing my job, Sofia protested, uncomfortable with the weight of obligation in his voice. No, Dante corrected, stepping closer. You gave my wife a piece of yourself, your time, your language, your culture. You built a bridge from nothing and pulled her back across it. That's not a job, that's a gift. He pulled an envelope from his jacket and placed it on the table between them. I've arranged for your grandmother's medical expenses to be covered completely. Any treatment she needs, any medication, all of it. I've also settled your student loan debt in full. Sofia stared at the envelope, her mind struggling to process what he was saying. Her grandmother's diabetes and heart condition required expensive medications that even with Sofia's insurance were a constant financial burden. Her student loans were a crushing weight that would take decades to repay. The idea of both suddenly gone was incomprehensible. I can't accept this, she said, even as part of her desperately wanted to. It's too much. It's not appropriate. It's done, Dante interrupted with the casual finality of someone used to his decisions being irreversible. The debts are paid. The medical accounts are established. This isn't a negotiation, Sofia. It's a fact. The use of her first name the first time he'd spoken, it felt intimate, almost inappropriate. Sofia felt the ground shifting beneath her. the careful boundaries of their professional relationship blurring in ways that frightened her. "Mr. Moretti." "Dante," he corrected. "You've given me back my wife, Sofia. The least you can do is call me by my name." Something in his tone, in the way he was looking at her, made Sofia's pulse quicken. This was dangerous territory, not just professionally, but personally. She was becoming too important to this man, too valued in a world where value could be as dangerous as threat. "I should get back to Elena," Sofia said, backing toward the door. "She'll be waking soon, and she's most comfortable when I'm there." Dante nodded but didn't move to let her pass immediately. "My family owes you everything, Sofia. I protect what I value. Remember that." It sounded like a promise, but Sofia couldn't shake the feeling it was also a warning. Over the following weeks, Elena's recovery progressed with remarkable speed. Her memories returned in fragments, faces without names, emotions without context, gradually coalescing into the life she'd lived. Her relationship with Dante remained complicated, shadowed by the trauma her brain associated with his world even as she intellectually understood he was her husband. But her connection with Sofia remained the strongest, the most natural. Sofia was safety, familiarity, the voice that had pulled her from darkness. It was Sofia she called for when nightmares woke her. Sofia whose hand she reached for when physical therapy became painful. Sofia she trusted absolutely. Dante noticed, of course. He noticed everything. "She still flinches when I touch her," he confessed to Sofia one evening after Elena had fallen asleep following an exhausting therapy session. 6 years of marriage, 2 children, and she looks at me like I'm a stranger, sometimes like I'm the enemy. Sofia heard the pain beneath his controlled tone. "The poisoning happened at your dinner table, during what should have been a safe family moment. Her subconscious associates you with that trauma, even though her conscious mind knows you're not responsible. It will pass as she continues to heal. And if it doesn't?" The vulnerability in the question was startling from such a powerful man. "Then you'll adapt," Sofia said simply. "You'll love her anyway. Support her anyway. Be patient anyway. That's what you've been doing for 6 months. You can continue." Dante studied her face, something unreadable in his expression. "You make it sound simple." "Love is simple," Sofia replied. "It's everything around it that's complicated." She didn't realize the danger of those words until she saw how Dante's expression shifted, something dark and hungry, flickering in his eyes before he controlled it. The threat, when it came, arrived through a channel Sofia had never expected: her grandmother. Lola Maria called Sofia's cell phone during her lunch break, her elderly voice trembling with fear. "Apo, there are men here. At the apartment. They say they need to speak with you about Mrs. Moretti." Sofia's blood turned to ice. "Lola, get out of there. Go to Mrs. Cruz's apartment next door. They say if you don't come home immediately, they'll wait. They're very polite, Apo. But," her grandmother's voice dropped to a whisper, "they have guns." Sofia didn't remember running to Marco, didn't remember the frantic explanation. She only remembered being in a car, Angela driving with controlled speed while Marco made a series of rapid phone calls in Italian, his tone clipped and furious. "Boss needs to know," Marco said, ending one call and immediately dialing another. "This is a direct violation. Someone is testing our protection." Sofia's modest apartment building in Pilsen looked normal from the outside, nothing to indicate the threat waiting within. But Marco's team was already there. 3 black SUVs disgorging men in suits who moved with military precision. "Stay in the car," Angela ordered, but Sofia was already opening the door. "My grandmother is in there, and my men are handling it," a familiar voice said from behind her. Dante emerged from one of the SUVs, his presence both reassuring and terrifying. "No one threatens what's mine, Sofia. No one." The casual possessiveness of mine should have alarmed her. Instead, all Sofia could focus on was getting to her grandmother. What followed happened with surreal speed. Marco's team entered the building first, followed by Dante and Sofia, with Angela maintaining a protective position. They found Lola Maria in the hallway outside Sofia's apartment, being comforted by Mrs. Cruz. While inside the apartment, 2 men in casual clothes sat in Sofia's small living room as if they belonged there. They stood when Dante entered, recognition and fear flickering across their faces. "You made a mistake," Dante said quietly, his calm more frightening than shouting would have been. "Explain it to me so I can understand why you're not already dead." The older of the 2 men, heavy-set with a scar across his cheek, spoke quickly in Italian. Sofia caught enough to understand they were claiming this was a message, not a threat. Someone wanted Dante to know that his association with the nurse was being watched, that his enemies could reach her any time. "Who sent you?" Dante's voice dropped even lower, a tone Sofia had never heard before, pure, controlled violence. "The Calabrese family," the man admitted. "They wanted you to know they can touch your new asset." The word asset made Sofia's skin crawl. That's what she'd become in this world, not a person, but a piece on Dante's chessboard, valuable enough to target. What happened next? Sofia mostly heard rather than saw. Dante moved with shocking speed for a man his size, and suddenly the scarred man was on his knees. Dante's hand wrapped in his hair, his head forced back at a painful angle. "You came into this woman's home. You frightened her grandmother. You threatened someone under my protection." Each sentence was punctuated by increased pressure. "Give me one reason I shouldn't kill you both right now." "Boss," Marco interrupted carefully. "Police response time in this neighborhood is 7 minutes. We've been here for 4. Dante's jaw clenched, furious at the interruption, but recognizing the wisdom. He released the man with a shove that sent him sprawling. "Get them out of here. The Calabrese family will receive my response by morning." As Marco's men removed the intruders, Dante turned to Sofia and her grandmother. His expression transformed completely, the violence disappearing behind a mask of concerned civility that was somehow more unsettling than his anger. "Mrs. Ramos," he addressed Lola Maria in surprisingly fluent Tagalog, a detail Sofia hadn't known about him. "I apologize for this intrusion. You and your granddaughter will be moving immediately to a secure location. Your belongings will be packed and transported tonight." "Mr. Moretti, that's not necessary," Sofia began. "It's non-negotiable," Dante interrupted, switching to English. "They know where you live, Sofia. They've shown they're willing to target your family to get to you. I won't allow it. I can't just leave my home. You can and you will." The command in his voice was absolute. "You have 2 choices. A private apartment in my building with 24-hour security, or a guest house on my estate. Either way, you and your grandmother are under my protection starting now." Lola Maria, who had been silent during this exchange, spoke up in Tagalog. "Apo, this man is dangerous. I see it in his eyes. Whatever you've become involved in, I'm helping his wife recover, Lola. That's all." But even as Sofia said it, she knew it was a lie. She'd become something more than Elena's nurse. She'd become a valued asset to Dante Moretti, and in his world, that meant belonging to him in ways she was only beginning to understand. "Your grandmother is right to be cautious," Dante acknowledged, apparently understanding more Tagalog than he'd let on. "I am dangerous, Mrs. Ramos, but not to Sofia, and not to you. To the people who would harm you, yes. To them, I'm deadly." The casual way he admitted his nature was somehow more frightening than if he'd tried to deny. By midnight, Sofia and her grandmother were installed in a penthouse apartment in Dante's building, the same building where Elena would eventually recover, where Dante's children lived, where his entire operation was headquartered. The apartment was larger than any place Sofia had ever lived, decorated in understated elegance that spoke of professional designers rather than personal touch. "You'll be safe here," Dante assured them, giving Sofia a key card that accessed both the apartment and private elevator. "Marco's team has the building locked down. No one enters or leaves without clearance." "This is too much," Sofia protested, overwhelmed by the speed at which her life was being rearranged. "I just need basic security until..." "Until when?" Dante challenged. "Until the Calabrese family decides to try again? Until another rival family sees you as leverage against me? Sofia, you saved my wife's life. That made you important to me. Being important to me makes you a target. Those are the facts. The only variable is whether you're a protected target or a vulnerable one." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming in the luxurious space. "I failed to protect Elena when she was poisoned. I won't fail again. Not with her, and not with you." The intensity in his eyes made Sofia's breath catch. There was something in the way he looked at her, not quite attraction but not quite professional concern either. Something complicated and dangerous that she couldn't name but could feel like static electricity between them. "I need to get back to Elena," Sofia said, desperate to escape the suffocating intimacy of the moment. "She'll be waking soon. She'll be fine for one night without you," Dante interrupted gently. "Angela will stay with you tonight. Tomorrow, we'll establish a new routine that accommodates your changed circumstances." After he left, Sofia stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago's skyline, trying to process how completely her life had transformed. 2 months ago, she was an anonymous nurse, struggling to make ends meet. Now she lived in a penthouse, her debts erased, her grandmother's health secured, and she was under the protection of one of Chicago's most dangerous men. The question that kept her awake that night wasn't whether she could afford this protection. It was whether she could afford what it would eventually cost her. The morning light filtered through the penthouse windows with a quality Sofia had never experienced in her old apartment, golden and warm, unobstructed by neighboring buildings or grimy glass. She had barely slept, her mind racing with the implications of everything that had happened. Lola Maria was still asleep in the guest room, exhausted by the previous night's ordeal, when Angela knocked softly on the door. "Mr. Moretti has arranged for a car to take you to the hospital," Angela informed her, professional as always. "He thought you'd want to check on Mrs. Moretti first." The ride to Chicago Memorial felt different now. The car was armored. Angela pointed out the bulletproof glass and reinforced panels with the casual tone of someone discussing weather. 2 additional vehicles followed at discreet distances, part of the security envelope that now surrounded Sofia's every movement. At the hospital, the changes were even more apparent. The entire floor housing Elena's room had been essentially privatized. Dante's security-controlled access, and only pre-approved medical staff were permitted entry. Sofia's colleagues looked at her with a mixture of awe and wariness, whispering when they thought she couldn't hear. Elena was awake when Sofia entered, and her face lit up with the unguarded joy of a child seeing a beloved parent. "Sofia," she called out, her voice stronger than it had been days ago. "Nandito ka na. You're here now." "I'm here," Sofia confirmed, moving to her bedside and taking her hand. "How are you feeling this morning?" "Scared," Elena admitted in Tagalog, her eyes darting to the guards visible through the window. "There are so many men with guns. Dante says they're protecting us, but protecting us from what? What happened to me, Sofia? Really happened?" This was the conversation Sofia had been dreading. Elena's memories were returning, but they were fragmented, confusing. She remembered her children clearly now, remembered loving Dante, but the circumstances of her poisoning remained hazy, traumatic flashes, without coherent narrative. "You were poisoned," Sofia said gently, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Someone put something in your wine during dinner. It was meant for Dante, but you drank it instead." Elena's hand tightened on Sofia's. Who would want to kill my husband? The question revealed how much Elena still didn't understand or had chosen not to know about the life Dante led. Sofia found herself in the impossible position of explaining to a woman recovering from a coma that her husband was far more than the legitimate businessman he appeared to be. "Dante has enemies," Sofia said carefully. "People who see him as a threat, who want what he has, who would hurt him by hurting those he loves. And now they want to hurt you too," Elena said, her perception cutting through Sofia's careful phrasing. "Because you saved me, because Dante values you." Before Sofia could respond, the door opened, and Dante entered, followed by an older gentleman Sofia hadn't met before, distinguished, silver-haired, with the kind of presence that suggested authority earned rather than assumed. "Elena, you're looking stronger," Dante observed, moving to his wife's other side with the careful courtesy of someone approaching a skittish animal. "This is Dr. Marcello Rossini. He's a specialist I've brought in from Italy, specifically for your case." Dr. Rossini conducted a thorough neurological examination, while Dante watched with hawkish attention. The doctor's assessment was, cautiously optimistic. Elena's cognitive functions were recovering remarkably well, though her emotional memory processing remained impaired. She could recall facts about her life but struggled to connect emotionally with some of her memories, particularly those associated with trauma. "This dissociation is a protective mechanism, Doctor," Rossini explained in accented English. "Her brain is shielding her from the full emotional weight of what happened until she's strong enough to process it. As she continues to heal physically, the emotional connections should restore themselves." After the examination, Dante requested a private conference with Sofia. They moved to the small office that had been converted into a command center for Elena's care, leaving Marco stationed outside. "The Calabrese family received my response last night," Dante said without preamble, his voice carrying that dangerous quietness Sofia had learned to fear. "The men who entered your apartment won't be threatening anyone again. Their bodies were found this morning in a way that sends a very clear message about what happens to those who touch what's mine." Sofia felt sick. "You killed them." "I had them killed," Dante corrected, as if the distinction mattered. "There's a difference. I don't personally pull triggers anymore. I have people for that. But yes, they're dead, and their family knows exactly why." "This is insane," Sofia whispered, gripping the edge of the desk. "People are dying because I'm helping your wife recover. People are dying because they threatened you," Dante interrupted, moving closer. Because they made the catastrophic error of thinking they could use you against me. This isn't your fault, Sofia. This is the reality of my world. A world you're now part of, whether you chose it or not. I didn't choose any of this. No, Dante agreed, his hand coming up to cup her face with surprising gentleness. But you chose to save my wife when you could have remained. Anonymous. You chose to speak to her in Tagalog when you could have stayed silent. Every choice you made brought you closer to my family, and now you're under my protection. That's not negotiable. Sofia jerked away from his touch, unsettled by how her body responded not with fear, but with something far more dangerous. Your protection comes with a price. Everything comes with a price, Dante said. At least mine is honest. I protect what's mine absolutely, Sofia. No half measures, no hesitation. You and your grandmother will be safe because anyone who threatens you will die. That's my promise. Before Sofia could respond, Marco knocked urgently on the door. Boss, we have a situation. The situation turned out to be Isabella and young Marco, who had apparently slipped away from their nanny and made their way to the hospital, desperate to see their mother. Security had caught them trying to bypass the checkpoints, and Isabella was in tears while Marco maintained a brave face that was crumbling at the edges. They wanted to surprise Mrs. Moretti, the embarrassed security guard explained. The nanny didn't realize they'd left until— It's fine, Dante interrupted, his voice softening as he looked at his children. Let them through. Sofia watched as Dante knelt to his children's level, speaking to them in low, patient tones. This was a side of him she rarely saw, not the dangerous crime boss or the desperate husband, but simply a father trying to navigate impossible circumstances with children too young to understand why their world had become so complicated. Can we see Mama? Isabella asked, her small hand clutching her father's. Please? I made her a drawing at school. Elena's reaction to her children was transformative. The fear and confusion that shadowed her interactions with Dante disappeared completely when Isabella and Marco climbed carefully onto her bed. She held them both, tears streaming down her face, murmuring in Tagalog about how much she'd missed them, how much she loved them. Sofia stood back, observing the family reunion, and felt like an intruder. This was what she'd been fighting for, this moment of connection, of love, of family restored. But she also felt a painful awareness of her own isolation. She had no husband, no children, no family beyond Lola Maria. She had dedicated her life to caring for others, and in this moment, surrounded by the Moretti family's love, she felt the full weight of her loneliness. You did this, Dante said softly, appearing beside her. You gave us this moment. I'll never forget that. The intensity in his voice made Sofia deeply uncomfortable. There was gratitude there, yes, but also something else, something that felt like possession, like claim. She was becoming too important to him, too valued in ways that went beyond professional respect. Over the following weeks, Elena's recovery accelerated. She graduated from bed to wheelchair, then to walking with assistance. Her memories continued to return in fits and starts vivid recollections of her childhood in Manila, her immigration to Chicago, meeting Dante at a hospital charity event where he was a major donor and she was a young administrator, struggling to establish herself in a new country. I was so naive. Elena confessed to Sofia one afternoon during their private sessions. I saw this handsome, powerful man who seemed genuinely interested in me, in my culture, in my dreams. I didn't understand what his power was built on until after we were married. And when you found out? Sofia asked carefully. Elena's expression grew distant. I was already pregnant with Marco, already in love, already committed to a life I hadn't fully understood I was choosing. She turned to Sofia with eyes that held hard-won wisdom. That's the thing about Dante's world, Sofia. By the time you understand what you've stepped into, it's too late to step back out. The warning was clear, even if unspoken. Sofia was following the same path Elena had walked years before. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening, 6 weeks after Elena's awakening. Sofia was preparing to leave the hospital, exhausted after a particularly intensive therapy session, when Dante requested she join him for dinner. Not a request, really more of an expectation delivered with the courtesy of a question. Elena's asleep, he explained, guiding Sofia to the private dining room on the hospital's executive floor that he'd essentially commandeered. And I wanted to discuss her long-term care plan with you. The dining room had been transformed. Candles flickered on an elegantly set table, and the meal waiting for them looked like it had been prepared by a high-end restaurant, rather than hospital food services. This wasn't a business meeting. This was something else entirely. Mr. Moretti. Dante, he corrected, pulling out her chair with old-world courtesy. After everything we've been through together, I think we're past formalities. Sofia sat reluctantly, aware that refusing would create more problems than accepting. As they ate salmon prepared perfectly, wine that probably cost more than Sofia used to make in a week, Dante spoke about Elena's progress, about plans to move her to a specialized rehabilitation facility he was having built on his estate. I want you to oversee her care there, he said. Full medical staff, state-of-the-art equipment, whatever you need. You'd live on the estate, of course. There's a guest house that would be perfect for you and your grandmother. Dante, I can't. I'm offering you a position as Elena's private nurse, he continued, as if she hadn't spoken. Salary 3 times what the hospital pays you. Full benefits. Complete autonomy over her care plan. You'd be helping my wife continue her recovery while being completely protected from any threats. It was a golden cage, Sofia realized. Beautiful, luxurious, and utterly confining. She would be trading her independence, her career, her entire life outside the Moretti family's orbit for security and wealth. I need time to think about it, Sofia said carefully. Dante's expression hardened slightly. The Calabrese family isn't the only threat, Sofia. There are others, the Benedetti organization, the Russian syndicate moving into our territory, even some of my own people who see Elena's recovery as a weakness, evidence that I'm distracted, vulnerable. He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. You're not safe outside my protection. Your grandmother isn't safe. Every day you maintain your separate life is another day you're exposed to people who would use you to get to me. So I'm a prisoner? Sofia asked, pulling her hand back. You're protected, Dante corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Sofia challenged. Because from where I'm sitting, you're telling me I have to give up my entire life, live where you tell me, work only for your family, be completely dependent on your protection. That sounds like a very comfortable prison. Dante's jaw tightened, anger flickering in his eyes before he controlled it. I'm offering you safety, Sofia, security, a life free from financial worry, where you can focus solely on work you clearly love, helping my wife recover. How is that a prison? Because it's not my choice. Sofia stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Every decision is being made for me. Where I live, who protects me, how I work, all of it arranged by you without my input. I'm grateful for everything you've done, Dante. Truly. But I can't become another possession in your collection. The word possession hung between them, sharp and accusatory. Dante stood slowly, his considerable presence suddenly oppressive in the intimate space. Is that what you think you are to me? His voice was dangerously quiet. A possession? I don't know what I am to you, Sofia admitted, her voice trembling slightly. But I know. I'm more than Elena's nurse now. I know you look at me in ways that have nothing to do with professional respect, and I know that terrifies me, Dante. Because you're married to a woman I care about, a woman I've spent months helping recover, and whatever this, she gestured between them, whatever this is, it's wrong. Dante moved closer, not touching her but close enough that she could feel his heat, smell the expensive cologne that had become familiar over weeks of close proximity. You're right, he said simply. You're more than Elena's nurse. You're the woman who saved my wife's life, who gave my children their mother back, who stepped into my world without hesitation because you saw someone suffering and couldn't walk away. You're brave, compassionate, and stronger than you realize. And yes, I look at you differently than a mere employee. I look at you with respect, with gratitude, with... He stopped himself, but Sofia heard the unspoken word hanging between them. This can't happen, Sofia whispered. Whatever you're feeling, whatever I'm feeling, it can't happen. Elena deserves better than that. You owe her that much. I owe her everything, Dante agreed, his voice rough with emotion. My life, my loyalty, my devotion. But that doesn't change what you've become to me, Sofia, and I think you know exactly what that is. Before Sofia could respond, her phone buzzed with an emergency alert. Then another. Then Dante's phone erupted with calls. Marco bursting through the door with barely controlled urgency. Boss, we have a situation. It's the estate. Someone's breached the perimeter. The ride to Dante's estate was tense and silent. Sofia had insisted on coming despite Dante's protests. Lola Maria was there. Brought to the estate earlier that day for what Sofia had been told was a routine security upgrade. Now she understood it had been something else entirely, moving her grandmother to the heart of Dante's fortress before whatever was coming arrived. The estate was in controlled chaos when they arrived. Security personnel moved with military precision, establishing defensive positions while Marco coordinated communications. Dante's children had been secured in the panic room with their nanny, and Elena, still too weak to be moved far, had been positioned in the most secure room in the main house with a dedicated security detail. "What's happening?" Sofia demanded as Angela led her to where Lola Maria sat with several other non-essential personnel in a reinforced safe room. "The Benedetti family," Dante explained, his voice cold and controlled. "They've made their move. 20 men, heavily armed, trying to breach the estate. They're not trying to kill me, they're trying to take hostages." Leverage. The implications were clear. Sofia, her grandmother, or worst of all, Elena or the children could be used to force Dante's hand, to extract concessions or destroy him entirely. What followed was 3 hours of terrible waiting. Sofia sat with her grandmother, listening to the sounds of combat filtering through the estate's thick walls. Gunfire, shouted orders, the kind of violence that had been abstract to Sofia until now, when it was happening in the same building where she stood. When it was finally over, Marco appeared at the safe room door, looking grim but satisfied. "All hostiles neutralized. No casualties on our side. Boss wants everyone to remain in secure locations until we've swept the entire property." Neutralized was a sanitized word for what Sofia knew had actually happened. Men had died tonight, violently, because they'd tried to take what belonged to Dante Moretti. The casual brutality of it made Sofia's stomach turn even as she recognized it had likely saved all their lives. When they were finally cleared to leave the safe room, Sofia found Dante in his office, blood on his shirt not his own, she realized with sick certainty, giving orders with the cold efficiency of a general, after battle. "The Benedetti patriarch will receive his son's bodies in the morning," Dante was saying to Marco. Along with a message, "This war ends now, or his entire family tree ends with it." He looked up as Sofia entered, his expression shifting from deadly commander to something more human. "Are you hurt?" "No," Sofia managed. "My grandmother?" Shaken but unharmed, Angela is with her. Dante moved toward her, then seemed to think better of it, maintaining distance. "I'm sorry you had to experience this, Sofia. But this is why I've been insistent about protection, about keeping you close. This is the reality of my world." "People died tonight," Sofia said, her voice hollow. "How many?" 17 attackers, 3 of mine wounded, none killed." He stated it like a business report. Casualties and assets rather than human lives. It could have been much worse. They were specifically targeting the parts of the estate where you, your grandmother, and Elena were located. "This wasn't random violence, Sofia. This was an organized attempt to destroy me by taking the people He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The people I'm responsible for protecting." "I can't do this," Sofia whispered. "I can't live in a world where people die because I exist in your orbit. This is insane, Dante. This is unsustainable." "What's unsustainable is the alternative," Dante countered, his voice hardening. "If you leave my protection, they'll find you. Maybe not the Benedetti, they'll think twice now, but someone else. Someone who sees you as the way to hurt me. And without my resources, my security, you and your grandmother would be dead within a week." The brutal honesty of it stole Sofia's breath. He was right, and they both knew it. She'd become too valuable, too important, too deeply entangled in Dante's world to simply walk away. The moment she'd spoken to Elena in Tagalog, the moment she'd awakened the comatose wife of Chicago's most powerful crime boss, she'd sealed her fate. "So what now?" she asked, exhaustion making her voice crack. "I just accept this? Accept that my life isn't my own anymore? That I exist in your shadow, under your control, completely dependent on your protection?" Dante crossed the space between them, his hand coming up to cup her face with surprising gentleness. "You accept that I will move heaven and hell to keep you safe," he said softly. "That your life, your grandmother's life, they matter to me in ways I can't fully articulate. And yes, that means accepting my protection, my resources, my absolute commitment to ensuring nothing happens to you. Because I saved Elena," Sofia said, trying to understand the logic of his devotion. "Because you're you," Dante corrected, his thumb brushing her cheek. "Brave, compassionate, unwilling to look away from suffering even when it would be safer to do so. You could have ignored Elena, could have let someone else take her case, could have walked away at any point, but you didn't, because that's not who you are. And that, his voice roughened with emotion, that's why you're worth protecting. The moment stretched between them, charged with everything unspoken. Sofia knew she should step back, should maintain the professional distance that had already eroded beyond repair. But she was tired, frightened, overwhelmed by the violence she'd just survived and the intensity of Dante's devotion. "I need to check on Elena," she said finally, breaking the moment before it could become something irreversible. Dante nodded, stepping back and letting her pass, but his eyes followed her with that same intensity that made Sofia's heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. She found Elena awake in the secured room, being tended by one of the medical staff Dante had hired. The moment Elena saw Sofia, she reached out with trembling hands. "Are you hurt?" Elena asked in Tagalog, her eyes scanning Sofia for injuries. "They said there was an attack, that people died." "I'm fine," Sofia assured her, taking her hand. "Your children are safe. Dante is handling everything." Elena's expression shifted, a shadow crossing her face. "This is my fault," she whispered. "If I hadn't been poisoned, if I hadn't been weak for so long, Dante's enemies wouldn't see him as vulnerable. They wouldn't be attacking now." "This isn't your fault," Sofia said firmly. "None of this is your fault, Elena. The people who did this, who keep doing this, they're responsible for their own choices. But you're in danger because of me," Elena continued, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Because you saved me, because you stayed when you could have left, because," she paused, studying Sofia's face with disconcerting perception, "because my husband cares about you in ways that make you a target." The observation hung between them, impossible to deny or confirm. "I care about you," Sofia said carefully. "I care about your recovery, about your family. That's all." Elena's sad smile suggested she didn't believe that any more than Sofia did. "Be careful, Sofia," she warned softly. "Dante's love is a dangerous thing. It saved me once, but it could destroy you. He doesn't love halfway, he loves absolutely, possessively, with a devotion that can feel like suffocation. And once he decides someone is his to protect." She trailed off, the implications clear. That night, Sofia lay awake in the guest house on Dante's estate, where she and Lola Maria had been relocated temporarily after the attack. Through the window, she could see security patrols, could feel the weight of protection that was also imprisonment. She thought about Elena's warning, about Dante's intensity, about the impossible situation she'd created by simply being good at her job and compassionate toward a suffering woman. Somewhere in the main house, Dante was likely awake too, managing the aftermath of the attack, plotting his response to the Benedetti family, making the kind of decisions that would result in more violence, more death, more consequences spiraling outward from the central fact of his power. And tomorrow, Sofia would wake up and return to caring for Elena, would continue being the bridge between the woman recovering from trauma and the husband who loved her with dangerous devotion, would continue being too important to a man she couldn't allow herself to care about, in a world she couldn't escape. The trap had closed completely. Sofia just wasn't sure yet whether she'd been caught or whether, on some level she couldn't quite acknowledge, she'd walked into it willingly. 3 months after the Benedetti attack, Sofia stood in the doorway of Elena's private therapy room, watching her patient her friend take steady, confident steps across the balance beam with only minimal assistance from the physical therapist. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. The woman who had been comatose for 6 months, who had awakened, confused, and terrified, now moved with increasing grace and spoke with clarity that grew sharper each day. "Tignan mo, Sofia," Elena called out in Tagalog, pride evident in her voice. "Look at me. Walang tulong. No help." She released the therapist's hand and walked the final 3 feet independently, her face glowing with triumph when she reached the end. Sofia applauded, genuine joy warming her chest, despite the complicated emotions that shadowed every interaction with the Moretti family now. "You're amazing," Sofia said, moving forward to embrace Elena carefully. "Dr. Rossini said you've exceeded every projection for recovery. At this rate, you'll be completely independent within another month." Elena's smile faltered slightly. "And then what happens to you, Sofia? When I don't need a full-time nurse anymore, when I can care for my children myself, when I'm truly well again, where does that leave you?" The question had haunted Sofia for weeks. Her role as Elena's nurse was the justification for everything: her residence on the estate, her presence in the Moretti family's daily life, the protection that surrounded her like armor. Once Elena no longer needed her medical expertise, what reason would Sofia have to stay? More importantly, What reason would Dante have to keep her close? "I'll return to my life," Sofia said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. Back to Chicago Memorial, back to regular nursing, back to normal. Elena studied her face with disconcerting perception. "Do you really believe Dante will let you go? Do you really believe you can just walk away from this family now?" Before Sofia could answer, the door opened and Dante entered, his presence immediately filling the space. His eyes found Elena first they always did, assessing her condition with the vigilance that had never wavered despite her obvious improvement. Then his gaze shifted to Sofia, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "Elena, you're walking without assistance," he observed, genuine pleasure in his voice. "That's wonderful, Amor. The children will be so excited to see this." "Where are they?" Elena asked, accepting his kiss on her forehead with the comfortable intimacy of long marriage. "Isabella is at her piano lesson. Marco has soccer practice." Dante's hand lingered on Elena's shoulder. "I wanted to speak with both of you, actually. There's something we need to discuss." The seriousness in his tone made both women tense. Dante waited until the physical therapist had left before continuing, his expression carefully neutral. "The FBI has been investigating the Benedetti organization since the attack on the estate," he said. "They've offered me immunity in exchange for testimony about the family's operations, not just the Benedettis, but several other organizations they're targeting." Sofia's heart stuttered. She'd heard whispers about federal investigations, about major operations being planned, but she'd tried to remain ignorant of the details. Dante's world was dangerous enough without fully understanding its scope. "You're going to testify?" Elena asked, switching to Italian in her agitation. "Dante, that's a death sentence. Every family in Chicago will target you, which is why we'd be entering witness protection." Dante interrupted calmly. "New identities, relocation, complete separation from our previous life. The children would grow up safely, away from this world. You would be free from the constant threat of violence." The proposition hung in the air like a detonated bomb. Elena sank into a nearby chair, processing the magnitude of what he was suggesting. Sofia remained frozen, understanding that this conversation somehow included her, even though it shouldn't. "When?" Elena asked quietly. "The trial begins in 6 months. After I testify, we'd relocate immediately. Probably somewhere overseas, Italy perhaps, or somewhere more remote." Dante's eyes shifted to Sofia. "Which brings me to why I wanted you both here. Elena, you're still recovering. You'll need continued medical support, someone who understands your case intimately. Sofia, I'm asking you to come with us." The request, though it sounded more like an expectation, stole the air from Sofia's lungs. "Dante, I can't." "You can," he interrupted, his voice carrying that absolute certainty she'd come to recognize as non-negotiable. "I'm offering you a fresh start, Sofia. No debt, no danger, complete protection for you and your grandmother, a life away from everything that's made these past months so complicated." "A life in hiding," Sofia countered. "Witness protection means giving up everything. My career, my identity, my entire existence. And my grandmother. She's 72 years old. You're asking her to abandon the community she's built, the friends she has." "I'm offering her safety," Dante said firmly. "Real safety, not just temporary protection while threats are managed. Your grandmother nearly died during the Benedetti attack, Sofia. She was in that safe room, terrified, because of her connection to you. In witness protection, that threat disappears completely." Elena had been silent during this exchange, but now she spoke, her voice thoughtful. "You want Sofia to come with us because I still need her medical expertise." It wasn't a question, and the way she emphasized medical expertise suggested she understood there was more to Dante's request than professional necessity. "Among other reasons," Dante admitted, his eyes never leaving Sofia's face. "She's become important to this family. To you, to the children, to—" He paused, choosing his words with uncharacteristic care. "To all of us." "I need to think about this," Sofia said, backing toward the door. "This is too much, too fast. I need time." "You have until the trial," Dante said. 6 months to decide whether you're coming with us or staying behind to face whatever. Consequences follow when I testify against half of Chicago's organized crime families." The threat wasn't subtle. Without Dante's protection, Sofia would be vulnerable to retaliation from every organization he exposed. Her choice wasn't really a choice at all. That evening, Sofia found herself in the estate's garden, seeking solace in the carefully manicured beauty that seemed impossibly peaceful given the violence that lurked at its edges. She didn't hear Dante approach until he spoke from behind her. "You're angry with me." Sofia turned to find him standing in the shadowed pathway, his expensive suit replaced by casual clothing that made him look younger, less dangerous, almost human. "I'm overwhelmed," she corrected. "You're asking me to give up my entire life, Dante. My identity, my career, everything I've built, everything that's kept you struggling and alone," Dante interrupted, moving closer. "Sofia, I've watched you work double shifts to afford your grandmother's medications. I've seen you skip meals to save money. I've witnessed how hard you fight just to maintain the basics while the hospital administration undervalues and overworks you. What exactly are you so afraid to lose?" The question struck deeper than he perhaps intended. What was she afraid to lose? A cramped apartment she could barely afford? A career that had left her exhausted and underappreciated? The illusion of independence that had proven false the moment she became valuable to dangerous people? "My choices," Sofia said finally. "I'm afraid to lose the ability to choose my own path, even if that path is difficult. You're offering me comfort, safety, security, but all of it comes at the cost of my autonomy. I become dependent on you completely, Dante, and that terrifies me more than any threat from your enemies." Dante studied her face in the moonlight, something vulnerable flickering in his expression. "What if I told you it's not just about dependence? What if I admitted that I want you with us for reasons that have nothing to do with Elena's medical needs?" Sofia's heart hammered against her ribs. "Don't say it. Whatever you're thinking, whatever you're feeling, don't say it, Dante. You're married to a woman I care about deeply, a woman who's suffered because of your world. I won't be part of betraying her." "Elena knows," Dante said quietly, the admission hanging between them like a confession. "She's known for weeks how I look at you, how you've become more than just her nurse to me. We've talked about it." The revelation made Sofia's knees weak. What did she say? That she doesn't blame me for developing feelings for the woman who saved her life. That she understands gratitude can blur into something else when you're watching someone care for your wife with a devotion that rivals your own. Dante stepped closer, not touching but close enough that Sofia could feel his warmth. "But she also said that what matters isn't what I feel, it's what you feel, and whether you can live with whatever choice you make." "I don't know what I feel," Sofia admitted, her voice breaking. "You're married. You have children. You're dangerous and complicated, and you've built a life on violence I can't condone. But you're also devoted and protective, and you look at me like—" She stopped herself, unable to finish the thought. "Like you're precious," Dante completed softly. "Like you're someone worth protecting, worth valuing, worth keeping close." "Yes, Sofia, that's exactly how I look at you." Before she could respond, before she could do something irreversible, Sofia turned and fled back toward the guest house, leaving Dante alone in the garden with words neither of them could take back. The next 3 months passed in a strange limbo. Elena's recovery continued its remarkable trajectory. She was now walking independently, caring for her children with minimal assistance, reclaiming the life that had been stolen from her. The children blossomed under their mother's returned attention, their laughter filling the estate in ways that had been absent during her long illness, and Sofia found herself increasingly unnecessary. The medical justification for her continued presence eroded with each milestone Elena achieved. Other nurses could manage the remaining follow-up care. The specialized knowledge Sofia had provided the language bridge. The cultural understanding was no longer critical now that Elena had fully reintegrated into her life. Yet Sofia remained, living in the guest house with Lola Maria, ostensibly to provide oversight during Elena's final recovery stages. But everyone knew the real reason she stayed, because leaving meant making a choice she wasn't ready to make. The trial date approached with inexorable momentum. Dante spent increasing amounts of time with his lawyers, preparing testimony that would dismantle multiple criminal organizations. The tension on the estate ratcheted higher with each passing week, everyone aware that after Dante testified, their lives would change irrevocably. 2 weeks before the trial, Elena requested a private conversation with Sofia. They met in the library, away from the household staff and security personnel who had become background fixtures in their daily lives. "I'm releasing you," Elena said without preamble. "From your obligation to care for me, from whatever debt you feel you owe this family. Sofia, I'm well now, truly well, and you need to make your decision about witness protection based on what you want, not what you think you owe me." Sofia felt tears prick her eyes. "I don't know what I want." "Yes, you do. Elena countered gently. You're just afraid to admit it. You want safety for your grandmother. You want freedom from financial stress. You want to be part of something larger than your solitary existence. She paused, her next words carefully measured. And you want my husband. Elena, no. Let me finish, Elena interrupted, her voice kind but firm. I've watched you both for months now. The way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. The way you unconsciously seek him out when you enter a room. The connection between you, it's real, Sofia. And it's complicated by the fact that I'm still here, still his wife, still the mother of his children. Which is why nothing can happen, Sofia insisted. I would never. I know you wouldn't, Elena assured her. That's why I trust you. But Sofia, you need to understand something about Dante. His love is absolute. Once he decides someone belongs to him, he never lets go. He will protect them, provide for them, fight for them until his last breath. I've been the recipient of that love for years. It saved my life when I was poisoned. It brought me back from a coma. It's the most powerful force I've ever encountered. She reached across to take Sofia's hand. But it's also suffocating. It's possessive. It leaves no room for independence or choice. If you come with us into witness protection, you need to understand that you won't be just Elena's nurse or just another person under Dante's protection. You'll be his, completely and irrevocably. And I don't know if you're strong enough to maintain your sense of self in the face of that kind of devotion. The warning was clear, given with the wisdom of someone who had lived the reality Sofia was considering. What do you want me to do? Sofia asked. Elena smiled sadly. I want you to choose whatever allows you to sleep at night. Whether that's coming with us and accepting everything that means, or walking away and reclaiming your life. Either way, I'll understand. And either way, you'll always be the woman who gave me back my life. That debt can never be repaid, Sofia. So don't let it trap you into a decision you'll regret. The day before the trial, Sofia made her choice. She found Dante in his office, surrounded by legal documents and security briefings. He looked up when she entered, and something in her expression made him rise immediately. I'm coming with you, Sofia said, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. My grandmother and I will enter witness protection with your family, but I need you to understand something, Dante. I'm not doing this because I'm in love with you or because I want to be another person in your collection of protected assets. I'm doing this because Elena is my friend, and she still needs support. Because your children have become important to me. Because my grandmother deserves to live her final years without fear. And because she took a shaky breath. Because I can't imagine my life now without the family you've all become to me. Dante crossed the space between them, his hands framing her face with desperate gentleness. And me, Sofia? What am I to you? You're the most dangerous man I've ever known, she whispered. And somehow, also the most devoted. You're a contradiction I can't resolve, Dante. But I'm choosing to trust that the man who loves his wife and children so fiercely, who's willing to give up everything to protect them, is also the man who will respect the boundaries I need to maintain. Always, Dante promised, his forehead resting against hers. I will give you everything I can without betraying my vows to Elena. My protection, my loyalty, my devotion, all of it. But I will never ask you to compromise your integrity or betray the friendship you've built with my wife. Can that be enough? Sofia didn't know if it could be enough. Didn't know if she could live in the complicated space between Dante's family and her own needs, between the safety of his protection and the cost of being valued by such a dangerous man. But she knew that walking away now would haunt her for the rest of her life. It has to be, she said finally. 6 months later, in a small coastal village in southern Italy, Sofia woke to the sound of children's laughter and the smell of salt and air. Through her window, she could see Elena teaching Isabella and Marco to speak Italian with the local fishmonger. Her recovery so complete it was easy to forget she'd ever been ill. Dante emerged from the main villa, coffee in hand, his eyes finding Sofia immediately. He smiled a rare, genuine expression that transformed his face from dangerous to almost peaceful. Buongiorno, Sofia, he called, the Italian greeting natural after months of immersion. Good morning, she replied, accepting the coffee he brought to her small cottage adjacent to the main house. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the family that had somehow become hers. Elena's friendship hard-won and genuine, the children's affection unforced and sweet, and Dante's devotion constant, protective, and respectfully maintained at the boundaries Sofia had established. It wasn't the life she'd imagined during those exhausted night shifts at Chicago Memorial. It wasn't the independence she'd fought so hard to maintain, but it was safety, community, and purpose caring for people who had become more than patients or employers. It was a family forged in the most unlikely circumstances, held together by sacrifice, devotion, and the simple choice to stay when leaving would have been easier. "No regrets?" Dante asked quietly, as if reading her thoughts. Sofia watched Elena laugh at something Marco said, watched Isabella chase a stray cat through the village square, watched the peaceful morning unfold in this place so far from Chicago's dangers. "Ask me in another 6 months," she replied, a small smile touching her lips. Dante's answering smile held understanding, acceptance, and that same fierce devotion that had saved them all. "I'll be here," he promised. "For as long as you need me, for as long as you'll let me." And somehow, despite everything, Sofia believed him. Some prisons, she was learning, were built not with walls, but with devotion, and some freedoms were found not in solitude, but in choosing who you'd be bound to. She'd made her choice. Now she would live with it one day, one moment, one complicated breath at a time. 2 years after arriving in Italy, Sofia stood on the terrace of her cottage, watching the Mediterranean sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. The village had become home in ways Chicago never had: the rhythm of fishing boats returning at dusk, the sound of church bells marking the hours, the taste of salt air mixed with lemon groves and wild rosemary. Behind her, Lola Maria hummed while preparing dinner, her health transformed by the Mediterranean climate and the absence of stress that had defined her Chicago existence. She had friends now, other elderly women who gathered for morning coffee and afternoon card games, who shared recipes and gossip in a mixture of Tagalog, Italian, and broken English. "Sofia," Isabella's voice called from the main villa. "Come see what Mama and I made." Sofia smiled, setting down her medical journal. She still kept up with her profession, though her practice now consisted solely of Elena's follow-up care and occasional consultations with the village doctor. Elena had made a full recovery. Her only lingering effects were occasional headaches and a heightened sensitivity to certain medications. She was whole again, vibrant, devoted to her children and her marriage. Inside the villa, Isabella proudly displayed a painting, a family portrait that included not just Elena, Dante, and Marco, but also Sofia and Lola Maria. They were all together under a sprawling tree, rendered in the enthusiastic style of a 7-year-old who saw no contradiction in including her mother's nurse in the family tableau. "It's beautiful, Tesoro," Sofia said, kissing the top of Isabella's head. "You're part of our family," Isabella insisted, with the absolute certainty of childhood. "Papa says so, Mama says so. So it's true." Elena appeared in the doorway, her expression soft with understanding. "She's not wrong, you know. You've been with us through our darkest time and into this new beginning. That makes you family, whether it's conventional or not." That evening, after the children were asleep and Lola Maria had retired to her room, Sofia found herself sharing wine with Elena and Dante on the villa's terrace. The ease between them had taken time to develop, months of careful navigation, of respecting boundaries while building genuine friendship. "I have news," Dante announced, his expression serious but not troubled. "The trials are concluded. Every organization I testified against has been dismantled. The FBI confirmed yesterday that we're officially free from witness protection." The words hung in the warm night air, heavy with implication. "We can go home?" Elena asked, though her tone suggested she wasn't certain where home was anymore. "We can go anywhere," Dante corrected. "Chicago, New York, anywhere in the world. We're free, Elena. Truly free for the first time. Since we married." They both looked at Sofia, understanding that this news affected her future as much as theirs. "What will you do?" Sofia asked quietly. Dante's hand found Elena's, their fingers intertwining with the unconscious intimacy of long partnership. "We've talked about it. The children love it here. Elena has built a life. She volunteers at the village clinic, teaches English to the local children. I've started a legitimate wine export business that actually makes me happy." He paused, his dark eyes finding Sofia's. "And you're here. You've become essential to this family in ways that have nothing to do with medical necessity. We'd like you to stay," Elena added gently. "Not as my nurse, I don't need one anymore, but as our friend, as auntie to our children, as part of this strange, wonderful family we've built from tragedy." Sofia felt tears prick her eyes. "My grandmother is thriving here," Elena interrupted with a smile. "She told me yesterday that she never wants to see Chicago snow again. She has a whole community of women who adore her, She's happy, Sofia. The question is, are you? Was she happy? Sofia considered the question carefully. She'd given up her nursing career, her independence, the life she'd planned. She lived in complicated proximity to a man whose devotion still sometimes felt overwhelming, married to a woman who had become her closest friend. She existed in an unconventional arrangement that defied easy categorization, but she woke each morning to beauty and peace. She was valued not for her productivity but for herself. She had family chosen, complicated, but genuine, and she had purpose, even if it looked different than she'd imagined. "I'm happy," Sofia said, surprised by the certainty in her voice. "This isn't the life I planned, but it's the life I choose. Every day, I choose it." Dante's smile held gratitude and something deeper, a devotion that had mellowed over time into respectful affection. "Then, stay. Build your life here with us. Not as an obligation or under protection, but as a choice. As family," Elena added, reaching across to squeeze Sofia's hand. That night, lying in her cottage bedroom with the window open to the sea breeze, Sofia reflected on the impossible journey that had brought her here. A single decision to speak Tagalog to a comatose patient had unraveled her entire existence and rewoven it into something unrecognizable yet somehow right. She had saved Elena Moretti's life. Yes, but in the process, Elena's family had saved hers from loneliness, from struggle, from the grinding exhaustion of survival. They had given her community, security, and love in its many complicated forms. The boundaries remained. Dante's devotion was respectfully contained, his marriage to Elena solid and renewed. But within those boundaries existed genuine affection, mutual respect, and the kind of chosen family that transcended biology or convention. Sofia rose and stepped onto her small terrace, looking toward the main villa where lights still glowed. This was her family, now imperfect, unconventional, forged in trauma and sustained by choice. The dangerous Mafia boss, who had become a legitimate businessman and devoted father. The woman who had awakened from a coma to reclaim her life with fierce grace. The children who knew nothing of their father's dark past, only his present love. And Sofia herself, no longer just a struggling nurse, but auntie, friend, chosen sister to a family that had claimed her as completely as she had claimed them. In the distance, church bells marked midnight. A new day beginning in a life Sofia had never planned but couldn't imagine leaving. Some stories didn't end with romance or traditional happy endings. Some ended with something more complex and more real, with people choosing each other daily, building family from friendship, and finding peace in the most unexpected places. Sofia smiled, breathing in the salt air and the scent of night-blooming jasmine. She had made her choice, and she would keep making it, every day, for as long as this strange, beautiful family remained hers. That was enough, more than enough. It was everything. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.